Hello everyone and welcome back to the Dungeon Learner's Guide. Today we've got another Commander's Guild deck tech. This is deck 223 and it's titled Progenitus Has the Need for Speed. And if you haven't seen this show before, what we're doing is randomly selecting a card from scryfall.com or from among suggested cards, working with a budget of $100 or less and building a commander deck for Magic the Gathering around a theme of the chosen card. So today, our random card was suggested to us by both Doodle and Mort over on Discord, so I suppose great minds do in fact think alike, and that card was Amonkhet Raceway, which is a land that has starter engines, so if you have no speed, it starts at 1, it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life, and you have a max speed of 4. Then, the land itself can tap for a colorless mana, and if you have max speed, then the land can tap to give target creature haste until the end of turn. So when I was looking at putting this deck together, I was really struggling to come up with a commander, because originally I wanted it to be 3 colors, and there were some great speed commanders at 3 colors, but it just kind of didn't feel like it worked. It didn't feel like there was enough support for it, so we did eventually go 5 colors, and admittedly, while there isn't a great 5-color commander for this deck, I did find a funny one, which is Progenitus, because I really like the idea of a giant Hydra avatar driving around in a car because it has the need for speed. So Progenitus is white, blue, black, red, green for a 10/10 legendary creature Hydra avatar. It has protection from everything. If it would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. Now, as you may be able to tell, we're not fully going to be built around our commander. It doesn't really synergize with a lot of what we're doing, but it's a great top end and it's a great thing to kind of work our way toward. With that being said though, let's pick apart some of our themes for this deck and actually take a look at what we're trying to do. So first off, we of course have speed. Our main goal in this deck is to get to max speed as quickly as possible, essentially because there's a ton of max speed cards or cards that care about you having max speed, and we want to be able to trigger those as quickly as possible. So a good example of this is Outpace Oblivion, which is 2 and a red for an enchantment. It has starter engines. When it enters, it deals 5 damage to up to 1 target creature or planeswalker, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to deal 2 damage to each player who doesn't have max speed. Now, this is going to be a running theme with a lot of our speed cards. They're going to do something. In this case, Outpace Oblivion is essentially a removal spell, killing most things since it can do 5 damage. But then it's going to go and do something a little bit extra if we have max speed. In this case, 2 damage to each player who doesn't have max speed. So that is the core of our deck, and we of course need some other themes to help prop it up, but that's the main thing we're doing. So our second theme, and the main way we're going to be supporting our speed plan, is with cards that care about our opponents losing life. A good example of this is Belby Corrupted Overseer, which is a black and a green for a 2/2 legendary creature zombie elf. At the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds 2 colorless mana for each of your opponents who lost life this turn. So as a quick reminder, we increase our speed when an opponent loses life. So if we have other payoffs for our opponents losing life, we can very easily just do incremental amounts of damage, 1, maybe 2 damage to each opponent, and then get our speed up, trigger our max speed effects. But then with something like Belby, we would also make 2 colorless mana for each of our 3 opponents, essentially giving us 6 mana for free. This is a huge bump in power and ramp and everything our deck wants to do, so it's a great payoff if we don't have some of our speed cards. And then finally, we come to our last theme of the deck. Since this is a 5-color deck, you already know my third theme is Gates. I'm a huge supporter of Gates being a 5-color mana base. They're incredibly cheap. They're not as bad as people think that they may be, considering they all come into play tapped. There's so many synergies you can build around. So we do have a 5-color Gates package today that includes our lands, But it also actually plays a little bit into our theme with cards like Crackling Perimeter, which is 1 and a red for an enchantment, tap an untapped gate you control, and Crackling Perimeter deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is a great way for us to get our speed up, a great way for us to trigger things like Belby, and it's a great way to use our gates when we may not necessarily have as much mana as we need, or just a little too much mana in some cases. So Crackling Perimeter kind of hits on all of our themes and also showcases just kind of how synergistic our gate package can be. Moving on though, from our themes to our key cards section of this deck tech. These are the cards that I want to highlight that are incredibly powerful in the deck, very synergistic, and are some of the MVPs of the deck. So first up, we have Point the Way, which is 1 green mana for an enchantment. It has Start Your Engines, and you can pay a 3 and a green to sacrifice this enchantment and search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is your speed. Put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So if we include all of the mana related to this card, it's 5 mana to sacrifice it, but if we have max speed, that is 5 mana to search our library for 4 lands, which is very much above rate, a very powerful effect. And because we are 5 colors, we don't have a ton of basic lands, I'll be perfectly honest, but it's a great way for us to get some fixing, get the things that we need. Plus, on top of all of that, it is a 1 mana speed card, so we can drop it on turn 1 and immediately start getting value out of our speed and possibly hit max speed as early as turn 3 if we have the right setup. Moving on though, to our second key card. This one is Abaddon the Despoiler. And Abaddon is 2 blue, black, red for a 5/5 legendary creature Astartes warrior. It's got Trample and Mark of Chaos Ascendant. During your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. Since the vast majority of our cards want to deal damage to our opponents, it's very easy to get Abaddon to the point where it's pretty much letting everything in our deck have Cascade. Because if we can just do 3 damage to each opponent, that is 9 total life lost, and I'm pretty confident we don't have anything in the deck that costs more than 9 mana. That just gives everything in our deck Cascade. And that is an incredibly powerful effect because we're able to double up on all of our spells. We're able to kind of sneak everything into play and put ourselves in a position where we are outvaluing the rest of the table. That is only key card number 2 though. So moving on to key card number 3, we have Samut the Driving Force. And Samut is probably the best speed card in the deck. She is 3 red, green, white for a 4/5 legendary creature human warrior cleric. She's got First Strike, Vigilance, and Haste, plus, obviously, Start Your Engines. And other creatures you control get plus X plus O, where X is your speed, and non-creature spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is your speed. So even if we only have our speed set to 1 when she enters, she's immediately giving all of our other creatures +1 + 0 and making all of our non-creatures cost 1 less. So you can kind of see how this can get out of hand very quickly, especially because we are very good at maxing out our speed. So that would give all of our creatures +4 + 0 and make our non-creatures cost 4 less to cast. That is just a huge pump up in power for the deck and a huge way for us to force through damage, end games, and just kind of keep throwing out cards because we can just dump our hand, do some damage, get more cards, dump our hand again, and just keep that cycle repeating. That, though, brings us to the end of our key card section for today. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at some cool interactions in the deck. And these are cards that synergize really well with each other, and in some cases can be really synergistic in terms of value or win conditions, but a lot of times are just fun cards that I want to highlight. So the very first pair of cool interactions I want to talk about is between Court of Ambition and Neheb the Eternal. So Court of Ambition, 2 black for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card, but if you're the Monarch, instead each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. On its face, this is already a very powerful card for the deck, because it's going to be triggering our speed, it's going to be getting our speed up, it's going to be triggering things like Belby, and even on its worst case scenario where everybody chooses to discard a card, that is still each opponent discarded a card while we kind of didn't do anything. And on its best, it is each opponent either loses 6 life or discards 2 cards, which is an insane pump up in power for us. Combine that with Neheb the Eternal, though, and it just goes absolutely wild. Because Neheb, who, by the way, is one of my personal favorite commanders, is 3 red for a 4/6 legendary creature zombie minotaur warrior. He's got Afflict 3, and at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add 1 red mana for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So, if we look back to Court of Ambition and say we trigger the first one, we don't have Monarchy, and each opponent decides to lose 3 life, which in Commander is most likely going to be the case. People are not a fan of discarding when you've got 40 life to spare. That would mean that our opponents have now lost a total of 9 life this turn. So doing nothing else, Neheb will give us 9 red mana in our second main phase. However, in a best case scenario, each opponent will lose 6 life, meaning that we will get 18 red mana with Neheb in our second main phase. This is a tremendous way to just kind of dump our hand on the board, and yes, it's only 1 color in a 5-color deck, but that doesn't mean that it's going to just waste away all of our lands either. We can use the red for colorless mana or for anything else. There's a little bit of filtration in here as well. But it really just generates so much value that it's incredibly tough for our opponents to keep up with. That, though, is only cool interaction number 1. So moving on to cool interaction number 2, we have Creeping Bloodsucker and Fireglass Mentor. And this is kind of a similar interaction to the Court and Neheb, in the sense that we have Creeping Bloodsucker to do damage, because it's 1 and a black for a 1/2 vampire. At the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. So each opponent takes 1, we gain 3. And then we have Fireglass Mentor, which is a black and a red for a 2/1 Lizard Warlock. At the beginning of your second main phase, if an opponent lost life this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them, and until the end of turn, you may play that card. These 2 cards combined are incredibly powerful because we're doing damage, we're gaining life, and we're getting a source of card advantage. That is not something that's easy to come by in this deck, I'll be perfectly honest. There's not a ton of speed cards that draw cards. There's a couple, but not a ton. So being able to continuously get an additional card every turn is very powerful. Plus, our opponents are usually not going to be happy with our deck because it does want to just kind of paper cut them out of the game. So Creeping Bloodsucker gaining life is also going to be incredibly important. That, though, brings us to the end of our cool interactions, and the last piece of our deck tech is to talk about the price of the deck. So today, our deck came in at $61.22, with the most expensive card being Sig River Cutthroat at $8.86. Sig is another one of our great value engines in the sense that it can provide a ton of card advantage. It is a hybrid blue-black for a 1/3 legendary creature merfolk rogue. At the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 3 or more life this turn, you may draw a card. Now, it is worth noting that a lot of our effects trigger on our turn, so it's very likely we'll draw the card on our turn, but it does trigger on every other turn as well. So if an opponent attacks another opponent for 3 damage, we still get to draw the card. So Sig is very powerful and can kind of go undernoticed in most games, where people don't realize how much value it's generating until it's kind of too late to stop the deck. On the other hand, though, if you want to put a card into the deck that's a little bit outside of our budget range, I do have a suggestion for you there as well. And this week, I would recommend putting in Heroic Intervention and taking out Prisoner's Dilemma. So when I was playing this deck and playtesting it, making sure it ran well, I realized that we were very susceptible to board wipes. And I think adding in Heroic Intervention, which is the cheapest and most efficient protection spell out there, would really help us in that case. Now, it is unfortunately $10, but considering it's only 1 in a green for an instant that says permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, I do think it's worth it to try to keep our creatures in play, because if someone wipes our board, we are kind of in a bad spot. That being said, if you're putting a card into the deck, obviously you got to take a card out, and the card I would recommend taking out this week is Prisoner's Dilemma. Now, Prisoner's Dilemma is a card that I have tried to put in a ton of decks, and it just never quite feels as good as I want it to. And in this deck, it typically would wind up being 5 mana for us to trigger our speed, and we can do that much more efficiently with a much cheaper effect. However, that being said, it is still 3 red for a sorcery. Each opponent secretly chooses Silence or Snitch. Then the choices are revealed. If each opponent chose Silence, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 4 damage to each of them. If each opponent chooses Snitch, then Prisoner's Dilemma deals 8 damage to each of them. Otherwise, Prisoner's Dilemma deals 12 damage to each opponent who chose Silence, and it has flashback for 5 red. So this is quite literally the Prisoner's Dilemma in the sense that everyone is better off if you all stay silent, but if anyone snitches and everyone else stays silent, then they take additional damage and the person who snitched takes no damage. So there's a little bit of politics in it, which is kind of why I love this card. It's just so expensive and at sorcery speed, and it never feels like it does quite enough. It just kind of turns the rest of the table against you. So if anyone has great ideas for Prisoner's Dilemma, please let me know, because I would love to throw this in some decks. That being said, though, that does officially bring us to the end of our deck tech for today. And before we jump into a game with this deck, because obviously we got to see how this deck performs, I want to take a second to highlight some ways that you can help support the channel if that's something you're interested in doing. As always, you can just like the video and subscribe to the channel. That does help out quite a bit. We're trying to make that push to get to 2,000 subscribers. We're so close. I would love your help to get us there. And of course, if you want to go a little bit above and beyond in your support to the channel, you can always find us on Patreon, patreon.com/dungeonlearnersguide, and right here on YouTube as a channel member. So a huge shout out and a thank you to all of our current patrons and channel members. And one last quick shout out before we get into our game. In case you may have missed it, I recently launched a second channel along with my wife Lena, where we have been playing through some games lately. We started off with Oblivion Remastered. The first video went up yesterday, and then we're also starting to play Date Everything, which is going to be going up today. So if you're interested in checking out either of those, the uploads are going to be a little bit sporadic on this channel as we're just starting out, but I will do my best to kind of nail down a more consistent upload schedule soon. So if you're interested in that, please do check it out. We would love the support, so head on over there as well, check out what we got. But with all that being said and all of my self-shoutouts out of the way, let's check out our opponents for today and see who we're playing in our game. So starting off, we have Cole playing Tival, Arbiter of Virtue. We have Bilal playing Samut, the Driving Force. And we have Doodle playing Omnath, Locus of Mana. So starting off with Cole and his Tival deck, this is a Delve style deck, obviously, since Tival gives Delve, but it kind of also wants to play around with life totals, which I think is a very cool space to play in. He wants to both gain life and lose life and force his opponents to lose life, and I think there's a lot of cool synergies that can be done in here, so I'm very excited to see what he put together. Bilal, playing Samut, is kind of our opposing speed deck at the table today, although I imagine his deck is not quite as focused on the dealing damage as ours. I think having Samut in the command zone means that speed just kind of comes naturally as you start to pump up your team and make your spells cheaper. So I imagine his deck is going to be very fast, very efficient, and do a ton of damage, and that is something that I need to be aware of. Finally, though, our last opponent is Doodle with Omnath, Locus of Mana, and this is a deck that has shown up on the channel before. He calls this his Om-Nom deck, as he wants Locus of Mana to just eat his opponent's creatures. This is kind of a fight-style deck. He will just fill up his mana pool with green mana, make Omnath huge, have it fight down his opponent's creatures, and then just smack them to win. And this is probably the deck that I'm the most concerned about going into this game, because we don't have a ton of go-wide effects. We tend to focus on a few important creatures, and if Doodle can just start chomping on our creatures and knocking them down, then there's not much we're going to be able to do to get our board state back up. We're not going to be able to get our speed going. It's going to be kind of tricky to execute our game plan. So I think that that is going to be our biggest hindrance. But let me know down in the comments what you think is going to happen in this game. Make sure you get your predictions in about who's going to win, maybe which deck's going to pop off first. I always love seeing people's predictions. Other than that, though, thank you all so much for watching our deck tech today. Let's jump into this game, see how we do, and I will talk to you all once it's done. At the start of the game, Cole goes first, followed by Bilal, Doodle, and then myself. On Cole's first turn, he plays a Flooded Grove. Bilal plays a Forest. Doodle plays a Myriad Landscape. I play a Sanguine Morass. Cole plays a Viridescent Bog, then casts Sakura Tribe Elder. Bilal plays a Game Trail. Doodle plays a Forest. I play a Forest and cast Belby Corrupted Overseer, letting each player make 2 colorless mana in their second main phase for each of my opponents that lost life that turn. Then at the end of turn, Cole sacrifices Sakura Tribe Elder to search his library for a basic land, putting it into play tapped. On Cole's turn, he plays a Hinterland Harbor and casts Cemetery Tampering, hiding away a card, milling 3 cards in his upkeep, then casting the hidden card for free if he has 20 or more cards in his graveyard. Bilal plays a Sundown Pass. Doodle plays a Forest and casts Selvala Heart of the Wilds, which can be activated to make an amount of green mana equal to the greatest power among creatures that he controls, and also allows any player to draw a card when a creature enters under their control if it has the greatest power among creatures in play. I play an Amonkhet Raceway, setting my speed to 1, then I attack Cole for 2 with Belby, increasing my speed to 2 and making 2 colorless mana in my second main phase. This lets me cast Starting Column, followed by casting Creeping Bloodsucker, which does 1 damage to each opponent in my upkeep and allows me to gain life equal to the damage dealt. In Cole's upkeep, he mills 3 cards, and then casts Harrow, sacrificing an island to search his library for 2 basic lands, putting them into play. Bilal plays a Forest. Doodle plays a Forest and casts his commander, Omnath, Locus of Mana, now preventing his green mana from leaving his mana pool when he changes phases, and Omnath also gets +1/+1 for each green mana he has in his mana pool. After that, he activates Selvala to get 2 green mana so he can cast Aggressive Instinct, having Selvala do damage equal to her power to Belby, killing her. In my upkeep, each of my opponents takes 1 damage while I gain 3 life and increase my speed to 3. Then I cast Circuitous Route, searching my library for 2 gate cards, specifically Gond Gate and Baldur's Gate, putting them into play tapped, but now, thanks to Gond Gate, letting all my gates enter untapped. At the end of turn, Cole cast Grapple with the Past, milling 3 cards and then returning Disciple of Bolas from his graveyard to his hand. In Cole's upkeep, he mills 3 more cards before casting Welcome the Dead, drawing 2 cards, discarding a card, losing 2 life, and making 4 tapped 2/2 zombie tokens, since 4 cards were put into his graveyard from his hand or library this turn. Bilal plays a mountain and casts Roxanne Starfall Savant, drawing a card and creating a 2/2 meteorite token when she enters. Then, the meteorite deals 2 damage to a zombie, killing it. Notably, Roxanne also allows Bilal's artifact tokens to produce an additional green mana. Doodle plays a forest and floats 8 total green mana, making Omnath a 9/9, but then spends 2 of that mana to sacrifice Myriad Landscape, searching his library for 2 basic lands and putting them into play tapped. In my upkeep, each of my opponents take a damage while I gain 3 life and max out my speed at 4. After that, I cast Guild Summit, letting me tap any number of gates I control to draw that many cards, so I tap 2 gates and draw 2 cards. Notably, this now also allows me to draw a card whenever a gate enters under my control. In Cole's upkeep, he mills 3 cards, plays an Underground River, and then attacks me with all 3 of his zombies for 6 total damage. Then in his second main phase, he casts Nyx Weaver, now milling an additional 2 cards in his upkeep. Bilal plays a Karplusan Forest and casts his commander, Samut the Driving Force, setting his speed to 1 and giving his other creatures +X/+0, where X is his speed. This lets him attack me with Roxanne for 5, increasing his speed to 2, making another Meteorite, which enters and also does 2 damage to me. Doodle plays a forest and floats all of his mana to make Omnath a 24/24. This lets him cast Wind Swift Slice, having Omnath deal damage equal to its power to target creature, doing 21 damage to my Bloodsucker, killing it, and then Doodle also makes a number of 1/1 elf tokens equal to the excess damage dealt this way, which is 19. Once that resolves, Doodle also casts Azuri's Predation, creating a 4/4 beast token for each creature his opponents control, then having each of those beasts fight a different creature. This results in Doodle creating 5 beasts, 2 of which die, but also killing every creature his opponents control other than Samut. In response, Cole activates Nyx Weaver, exiling it to return Repay in kind from his graveyard to his hand, then the board wipe resolves and Doodle attacks Bilal with Omnath for 12. On my turn, I play a Manor Gate, drawing a card and cast Far Fortune Endboss, which, since I have max speed, has all my permanents deal an extra damage whenever they would do damage. Then I also cast Mendicant Core Guidelight, letting me pay 1 mana to copy any artifact spell I cast, since I have max speed. In Cole's upkeep, he mills 3, casts a Skull Prophet, which can tap to make a green or black mana, or can tap to mill Cole for 2. Bilal casts a Shared Summons, searching his library for 2 creatures and putting them into his hand. This lets him get Birds of Paradise and Topiary Stomper. Then, once that's resolved, Bilal also casts Elder Gargaroth, allowing him to either make a 3/3 beast token, draw a card, or gain 3 life whenever it attacks or blocks. Finally, he attacks Cole for 4 with Samut, increasing his speed to 3. Doodle plays a forest and casts Fyndhorn Elves before moving to combat and attacking Cole with all of his tokens for 31 total damage. Before the blocks though, Cole flashes in Fangkeeper's Familiar, gaining 3 life, surveilling 3, and letting him block 2 of the beasts that are attacking him, killing both of his blockers but only taking 23 damage, staying in the game. On my turn, I play a Selesnya Guildgate, drawing a card, then cast Outpace Oblivion, doing 5 damage to Selvala when it enters, killing her. Once that's resolved, I also cast Kambal Profiteering Mayor, letting me create tapped copies of any tokens that enter under an opponent's control, but only once each turn, and also making each of my opponents lose a life while I gain a life, whenever 1 or more tokens enter under my control. Finally, I cast Endwriter Catalyzer, which can tap for 2 red mana since I have max speed. In Cole's upkeep, he mills 3 cards, finally getting more than 20 in his graveyard, so he casts his hidden card for free, casting Taval's Judgment, now whenever a card leaves his graveyard, letting him choose an ability that hasn't been chosen this turn, from among drawing a card, making a treasure token, or making a 2/2 zombie token. Once that resolves, he casts his commander Tival, Arbiter of Virtue, giving all his spells Delve, but forcing him to lose life equal to the mana value of spells he casts. Bilal cast Arcane Signet and cast Primeval Bounty, now making a 3/3 beast token when he casts a creature, putting 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature when he casts a non-creature, and gaining 3 life when a land enters under his control. After that, he cast Topiary Stomper, searching his library for a basic land, putting it into play tapped, making a 3/3 beast token, and gaining 3 life. This also triggers Kambal, so I make a beast, gain a life, and make each of my opponents lose a life. Then Bilal casts Somberwald Sage, making another beast. Doodle plays a forest and passes. I play an Orzhov Guildgate, drawing a card, then cast Neheb the Eternal, now getting red mana in my second main phase equal to the amount of life my opponents have lost this turn. After that, I cast Megatron Tyrant, which can be converted in my second main phase to add a colorless mana for each life my opponents have lost this turn. As a show of good faith, I attack Cole for 4 with a beast, triggering Far Fortune to do 2 damage to each opponent, but then Cole is able to block and kill my beast with Tival, gaining himself 6 life. When I move to my second main phase, I make 6 red mana with Neheb, but don't convert Megatron, allowing me to cast Pride of the Road, now giving one of my creatures double strike at the beginning of combat on my turn, since I have max speed. Cole cast a Hydroid Crassus for X = 8 using Delve, meaning he loses 10 life, gains 4 life, draws 4 cards, makes a zombie token, and puts 8 +1/+1 counters on the Crassus. Then he plays a Woodland Cemetery and attacks me for 6 with Tival, gaining himself 6 life. In his second main phase, Cole delves out a Disciple of Bolas, losing 4 life, drawing a card, and then sacrificing the Hydroid Crassus when it enters, gaining 8 life and drawing another 8 cards since the Crassus had 8 power. Finally, he delves out Platinum Empyrean, losing 8 life, creating a treasure token, and now preventing his life total from changing. Once that resolves though, Doodle casts Bite Down, having Omnath deal damage equal to its power to the Platinum Empyrean, killing it. Knowing he's not able to survive another turn around the table, Cole decides to make things interesting by delving out Repay in Kind, losing 7 life, going to only 1, then making each player's life total equal to the lowest life at the table, meaning every player goes to 1 life. This means that on Bilal's turn, he's able to simply cast Perforos, God of the Forge, followed by a Birds of Paradise to trigger the god, doing 2 damage to each opponent, knocking us all out, and winning Bilal the game. Alright, so that was a sweet game. Definitely a lot going on very, very quickly in that game. I think it was actually kind of interesting to see that Cole's Tival deck did a lot of life loss and life gain, and he had the Imperial, whatever it was, the Platinum Empyrean. Very, very cool stuff. And I think that if he hadn't been forced to essentially go down to 1 life and repay in kind, I think that he probably could have wound up winning. I think he just put himself in a very tricky situation. And then, of course, that repay in kind, putting everyone to 1 life, meant that Bilal could very easily take advantage, use Perforos and a Birds of Paradise to knock everybody else out. And it's kind of interesting to see Bilal win that game, because as bad as it sounds, he really didn't do much in that game. He actually didn't play anything for the first 4 turns of the game, which is usually not where you want to be. So watching him come back and win was actually kind of cool, and I think that it came out of nowhere, but not in the same way that a combo win would come out of nowhere. He just kind of had things set up right, and the Perforos was exactly what he needed. Other than that, continuing around the table, Doodle's deck also did very well. He definitely played Arch Enemy for most of the game, and we talked about how on the turn when he killed my Bloodsucker and he had Omnath at 21 damage, he could have simply attacked me and knocked me out of the game, but he chose not to because he felt a little bit bad about knocking just 1 player out of the game. And we talked after the game about how that was probably the right call. He probably should have taken me out, and it's a very very difficult situation to be in when you don't want to knock just one player out if you don't know if you can knock the rest of them out. It kind of can lead to some feel bads, and it's a very tricky line to walk. So I'd love to hear people's opinions in the comments. Do you think Doodle should have taken me out that turn, or do you think he made the right choice leaving me alive? And then, of course, finally, moving around to our deck did really well. I'm actually very happy with it. I know it looked like we didn't do all too much, but we got our speed up very quickly. We did, unfortunately, fall victim to exactly what I said we were going to, which was Doodle just kind of fighting down our creatures, or in some cases forcing to block, but it was very cool nonetheless. And I think that one of the neat things about this game is that while Bilal did wind up winning, and he won with Perforos, if I had left some mana open, we did have Outpace Oblivion on the board, and at the time, when Cole set everyone's life total to 1, Bilal did not have max speed yet. He was still on 3. So if I had left open the mana to activate Outpace Oblivion, it would have done 2 damage to every player except for me, because I had max speed. Now, I had no way to predict that we were all going to go to 1 life, so there was no reason for me to leave Outpace Oblivion, but it was a neat little interaction that I wanted to make sure I highlighted, because you never know. Sometimes games can change at the very last second, and sometimes things happen. So I thought that was super sweet. Very happy with the deck, very happy with the game. Overall, thank you all to everyone for watching this far into the video. Thank you all so much for liking and subscribing to the channel, as I'm sure you already have, right? We've all liked the video. We all subscribed. Cool. Thanks. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the other side of the Dungeon Learner's Guide.